Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually or in person. My name is Jesse Whelan. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships. You'll also have
Should just introduce.
Bonnie Garcia Glockner, our Assistant Director. And so obviously we're going to be talking about summer research opportunities today. Bonnie and I both work with individual awards that fall under this category. There's a lot of overlap. So whether you're working with myself, with Bonnie, or our colleague Sam or Craig, we're a pretty small office, we're a small team, but we all are here to help you find in this case, the research opportunities or the internship opportunities, the international experiences, but the opportunities that are really going to enhance what you are studying or engaged with here at Florida State. And so I know sometimes when it comes to research that, there is that barrier to access, whether that's just from limited spots within the lab that you want to be in, depending on your field of study. It's the baseline or the floor of not like the knowledge that you need in order to even access or even understand the project. So with some of the opportunities that we're going to be talking about today, one of the major ones, the National Science Foundation's research experience for undergraduates, they really like to sell themselves as a point of access for many students. Not having a background in research yet is not a reason why you shouldn't apply for an REU. Of course, there are some that really require that technical knowledge, but by and large, they like to be a point of access for you. So when it comes to summer research, I guess depending on which side of the coin that you're looking at, I think this can be a really excellent opportunity to really dig deep and engage with the things that you maybe already know that you're passionate about, or maybe it can be your opportunity to explore and try something different. But when it comes to undergraduate research in general, sometimes those types of projects can, like I've been alluding to, either really confirm, yes, this is what I would like to do, or it can challenge that. If you get into a chemistry lab and you're like, oh my God, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I want to do. That could be a scary moment, but that's also a really good moment of like clarity of like, okay, well, I know it's not this. So this can help me find what it actually is. This is also summer research, in these types of fellowships, a really great way to engage with faculty, with graduate students, with staff on campus, but with the people who eventually, later this year, next year, by the time that you graduate, are going to be needing to write those letters of recommendation for you. That can obviously speak to your ability in the lab, your ability to work with others, your professionalism, your leadership, all of the skills that are really going to showcase, yes, I have the technical knowledge for this opportunity, but I'm also the right person. And so with these different fellowships, it can require anywhere from 1 to 3 usually. For some of our postgraduate awards, 5 or even more, which sounds ridiculous. But the point is, be building these relationships, and these fellowships are a really great way to help you do that. In the fellowships, sure, it's a line item on your resume, like with the name associated with some of these awards, people know what it is, but it's really the experience, the skills, and the knowledge that you're developing. But these are going to look really excellent the further along you move in your undergraduate career, especially as you're applying for graduate school or professional school, whether that be med school, law school, or the like. Yes, it's at the end of the day, it's about your skills, but it also doesn't hurt to have some nice recognizable awards on your resume. So to kind of start us off with these NSF-REUs, the National Science Foundation Research Experience for Undergraduates, this is often the low-hanging fruit when we're talking about summer research. And so these vary by institution. We'll kind of get into the nuances of that in a minute. Typically, minimum of 10 weeks over the summer. By and large, these are going to be fully funded experiences. In some cases, like a couple of years ago, I had a student who had multiple REU offers that she was considering. And one of them was going to pay for her housing for the 2.5 months that she was going to be there, and the other was not. That was the determining factor for her. So you can cast a wide net with these, which is nice, but you're going to find that most of them are going to not just cover your housing expenses, they're going to give you a stipend over the summer and make sure that, and pay for your travel, dependent on where it is. So they do take care of you. General requirements for the REUs, citizenship, you need to be enrolled as an undergraduate student. I guess the challenging, but also kind of the nice thing about these is, they are all across the United States at different universities, but they all have different processes, different deadlines, different number of essays that you need to submit, different number of recommendation letters. It's all up to the institution. And so I think some of the future slides that we have coming up, yeah, just to kind of show you. I mean, literally from the West Coast to the Northeast, anywhere in between. I think maybe in some rare cases there are international opportunities, but by and large, they are domestic.
A few in the UK now.
A few in the UK, awesome. And we'll get into some more opportunities later on if you're wanting to kind of blend like research with international travel. That's absolutely a possibility. But something else to consider is, for lower division students that I work with, for freshmen, for sophomores, they just might be looking for like research. It's like, I don't really care where you send me. I'm just looking to get into a lab, build some professional skills, and move on to other projects, or GIS opportunities. But for some sophomores, juniors, some fourth year students, for some engineering students, like in 5-year programs, it kind of depends. They can be a little bit more targeted with these REU opportunities in that, well, maybe I already have a good idea for where I'm wanting to go to graduate school. This can be a really excellent way for you to go and kind of suss out the vibe. Like, do you actually vibe with the PI in that lab? Or do you actually vibe with the culture at that institution or the city that it's in? So it's not uncommon for students that I work with to be, I'm only applying to these 3 REU opportunities because these are all viable options for me for graduate school, and I really don't want to do anything else. Because I guess where some students might get a little, and I can't blame you because I would be the exact same way. It's like, oh, well, I can apply to as many as I want. I'm going to apply to 15 REUs, which I've had students that have done. I don't recommend it, because at a certain point you kind of get to that law of diminishing returns, and it's like, okay, so if your 15th favorite REU offers you, do you really want to do that? Or is that you just doing something to do it? So anyways, it's usually pretty standard for me to work with students on 2 to 5 opportunities. Sometimes a little bit more depending on the field. But my best piece of advice is to create and name that Excel document now, and start listing out the universities, the PI, the contact information, the deadline, and all of this information so you have it in one place. And while this is primarily for STEM majors, they do have opportunities in education, people in society. They have had more non-STEM fields like business, for example, in the past, but for this year, this is what they got. So when you go to the REU website, if you Google NSF REU, it's going to be the first link. You're going to see all of these different fields of study, and when you click on one of them, you might have anywhere from a couple dozen to a few hundred different REU sites. And so it can get overwhelming. And so at this early stage, we really don't start working on REUs for like at least another month at the earliest. I would just literally sit down with Netflix and just start scrolling through the website, and just if something catches your eye, like the specific name of a project, or maybe a professor whom is well respected in the field, jot it down, and we can like pull through that list later. You may find that these REUs are not updated yet. That's okay. I think right now it's just purely to get an idea for what's out there. It is likely that most of the REUs on there are going to continue on for multiple years. It is dependent on funding. It's also likely that there will be new REUs added between now and say November, December, when they hopefully should be updated. So my best piece of advice there is find the PI and email the PI, and that you are going to get a range of responses. Some students will reach out and be like, hey, can we set up a Zoom call? I'm really interested in this opportunity. I'd like to learn more. They may direct you to the lab manager or grad student in that office, and they'd be more than happy to. Others, their idea of equity is like, we don't talk to anyone prior to the deadline for this REU, so please don't take that as don't take that negatively in any way. That is just their way to make sure they are treating everyone equally, so you're going to get the entire range of, we would love to talk to you, and absolutely not, but we will talk to you if you are a finalist, for the scholarship opportunity. Does that all kind of make sense so far? So like I said, cast a wide net, see what is out there, but there isn't a magic number to the REUs. It is just genuinely find what interests you. Good question.
Do you think it would just be a general good rule of thumb to try to reach out and try to maybe see if you can get that step in? And
Yeah.
also, another question is what, what's the likelihood that if you apply for these and you put out a good number of applications that you will actually get an offer?
We send students to REUs every single year. I don't have like a number, because the thing is with some fellowships, especially in STEM, you have to work with our office in order to be endorsed. The REUs you don't, so there's a lot of students that apply to these entirely on their own and they never talk to us. And while I'm biased and I don't recommend that, I might have anywhere from 5 to 10 students that I work with on a given cycle that come and work with me on like I said, anywhere from like 2 to 5 REUs pretty regularly. I would say about the 10 that I worked with last year at about 3 to 5 offers, from that group. So it really depends. It's hard for freshmen to get these opportunities, but we send freshmen every year, so it's all you can do is try and make sure that you don't tell yourself no. But what I was saying before we actually started this recording is like the REUs, like I said, are low-hanging fruit. You should absolutely apply to a couple of them, if for nothing else, just to test out that writing process. Because what you're going to need to write about yourself, your interests, and your goals for an REU is almost identical to some of the other opportunities that we're going to be talking about. So if you can do it for an REU, you can do it for any of these others. And if it works out, that's a really great opportunity. But balance that with involvement on campus. So find a faculty mentor, or a graduate student or a peer in your field of study that can help you find maybe that community, whether that is an RSO on campus or whether that is a lab, or a study group, and use that to branch out. So good question. But any other thoughts before we continue to move along? No? Cool. You're also going to find, let me actually get that out of the way so I can actually read my slides. Dependent on maybe some of the career objectives that you have. There are a lot of government funded opportunities out there, to work with, in this case, the Naval Research Enterprise and Internship Program, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, wherever you ultimately see yourself going long-term, like, private sector, public sector, and so this, again, talk to advisors and people within your field of study to help find some of these connections. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this opportunity, solely because it's very similar to the NSF REUs. We also work with the National Institute of Health, for example. Like, they all provide you a funded summer experience to develop in your field is kind of the overarching theme here. I mean, as you can see from the slide, it's a really good financial package that comes with this opportunity. It is due soon. Usually for like the REUs, if you give yourself a solid few weeks to really hammer out these essays, you'll find that they're pretty straightforward. Now, some of the other fellowships we're going to talk about at the end of the presentation, you cannot do that. They really require like 2 to 3 months, if not more, to really prepare for these opportunities. But the REUs is just, who are you? Why do you want this? What do you see for yourself next semester or next year? So that's what I mean when I say you can crank it out pretty quickly. But let's see, the Holling Scholarship, and I might, have Bonnie jump in because this is technically one of her fellowships. And so for students of ours that are interested in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and their mission, broadly speaking, in all of those fields of study that fall under NOAA, this is one of the best scholarships I think that we work with, both in terms of the financial package, but also in terms of the internships that they help fund. And so this is one that you can only apply to in your second year. So if you're a freshman, great, you know about it now. Come and talk to us next year. If you're a current sophomore, excellent. Talk to us now. Bonnie has just wrapped up Fulbright and is going to start recruiting for this. But you can see the eligibility on the left-hand side here. But to focus on what do you get from this scholarship, So I apply as a sophomore, and then I get 2 years, both during my second and during my third year, this $9,500 package to go towards books, tuition, fees, to use how you would like, but hopefully to make research and these types of professional experiences more accessible. But I think the money's nice, but I think the best aspect of this scholarship is the internship and the professional connections that it helps facilitate. So it is after your junior year, if I'm not mistaken.
Summer between junior and senior.
Between your junior and senior years, a fully funded research opportunity with NOAA at a NOAA site. And they will work with you to place you where you naturally fit based on what your interests are. They're going to pay for your travel, they're going to pay for your housing, and you do receive that $700 a week stipend. Now, they also have additional funding to help send you to professional conferences, to present on your research, to engage with professionals across your field of study, or engage with professionals across different disciplines. So Hollings is a really excellent scholarship to help get you connected within your field and really build that skill set in your resume. Bonnie, Jeppa.
I was just gonna say, it does have those declared majors there, but it's actually much wider than that. So if you can make a compelling case in there for why you want to work with a particular office within NOAA, it really doesn't matter what your major is. So for instance, we've had people in that had anthropology majors, had folks that were more strictly in like computer sciences. It was just making the case for the office at NOAA that they wanted to work with.
Cool. So do your research into NOAA positions, offices.
Yeah.
And every year, we always get, for example, we get a lot of students that study hurricanes, and so that's almost like oh yeah, we get the hurricane applicants because we're in Florida, obviously, but clearly that is urgent research across many different disciplines. For NOAA, I think you can convey the urgency for why do I need to develop this skill set and knowledge in order to make an immediate impact as a student, but also as a future professional. I think you have a lot of material to work with there. And so if you can guide all of that towards the specific career objective, how is NOAA going to help me get there? At the very least, you're going to have a competitive application. Questions about Hollings? Yeah.
Just so I'm getting this right, don't apply unless you're interested in actually working with NOAA, right?
Well, the internship is going to be with a NOAA facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
They are looking to see what is your sort of long-term commitment to a particular field. You don't have to say that the plan is to work with
NOAA always, yeah.
But like your research or what you plan to do should at least go back to one of these fields.
Yeah, I think if you can, obviously for the internship, like Bonnie said, express interest, but if your mission aligns with the values of NOAA broadly speaking.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they would really care if you work with a different agency or not, as long as you're working towards this common good. Cool. Application, oh, sorry. Thought I was done. This is one, like I said, we're starting to recruit now. I will point out these early spring deadlines, the ones that are due in January and February, kind of suck because what precedes that, it's winter break. And if you're like me, I want to enjoy the weeks off, the few sweet weeks off that I get on a given year. And I want you to enjoy that as well. So we start recruiting for these now because in late October, but really November, early December, we want to lay some groundwork to just get this application sorted. So when we do come back at the beginning of January, we maybe have 2 to 3 weeks to just, hey, let's just put like some final touches on this, but we are not like starting from the ground up, you know what I mean? And so even though it's like, yeah, wow, that's not due until January, it's like, well, actually, let's start working on it now.
And it says essay because of the way the thing is formatted, but it is like a series of shorter responses. So
Yeah.
it's
It used to be like
it used to
one
be
2-page
long
essay,
and
I
now
like
it's
breaking
very
it
much
down.
like Truman. So-
Yeah, absolutely. You do need 2 letters of recommendation. So again, if you're a first-year student, start building those relationships now, but only one needs to be from faculty. The other, maybe from a job or internship that you've had or professional recommendation, that's fine. And so again, just a reminder, it's important to build those academic connections and the professional connections.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's in a NOAA field either.
Cool.
Just FYI.
Yeah.
Someone that can speak to your research abilities.
Or transferable skills.
Yeah, or transferables.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm from the South, so when I say this, I say dotterize. That is not proper, but if you call it dotterize, I'm not gonna correct you. I think technically it was day-a-day, or day-a-day. So if you have more class than me, please, say
If
day-a-day.
you're in Germany, you should probably say.
Yeah, Bonnie and I were in Germany this summer and I just, every time I said, I just kind of mumbled, I'm like, oh, damn right, yeah. So dad, is one of those opportunities I mentioned earlier where it is the intersection of research, and international study and cultural experience. And so it takes place in Germany over the summer. Very similar to an REU in both in terms of the funding and how they support you, but also in the fact that you can apply to multiple. This does cap at 3. So when you create an account, that will give you access to the labs and everything that they have listed. And now, so while you can choose multiple, it is standard in that you write a cover letter for each of these labs. If you've never written a cover letter before, I'm sorry, well, they kind of suck. It's my least favorite style of writing, but we are here to help you navigate that. We try to keep it to 1 page. It's very concise, and it is essentially, again, briefly outline for me who you are and why do you want this, and then how is this going to transition back to your time at Florida State and the work that you're doing here. The biggest complaint that I hear from students about Dodd is simply the website. And it's like, I'm joking, but I'm also like not joking. It is give yourself time to create an account and navigate the website. And if you're having issues, contact me. I might kick your email to Dr. Dana Weber over in the German department because she also hates the website, but she can help you navigate it. But this is usually due in early December, usually that first or second week of December. And for Dodd, like I mentioned, for the REUs, they do like to be that point of access. For Dodd, I would recommend kind of getting your feet under you in terms of like getting engaged in research, building those transferable skills and kind of your chops in the lab, for lack of a better phrase. And so Dodd is usually for like those sophomores or juniors, who have had some research experience. So definitely something to build towards. And I guess our subtle, not so subtle plug for just Germany in general. As a country, Germany is really, really investing in their higher education. And it is incredibly cheap in many cases. And so they are really heavily recruiting Americans, but just international students in general to come to Germany to pursue a master's degree, which at the end of the day is about €500 in many cases for a fall and spring semester, which is, in my opinion, free. And so if you're interested in, again, international experience and maybe graduate education, this could be a really great opportunity prior to maybe that PhD or professional school. But under this larger Dodd umbrella, like, yes, they have STEM research opportunities. They also have language study opportunities. I should clarify that you don't need to speak German to qualify for this. The labs operate in English, but if you have German proficiency, that's obviously not going to hurt. And there's also an opportunity called the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange, CBYX, if you're interested in government and politics and foreign affairs. So it's not just STEM. They have, and many of our students have intersecting interests, but this is a really great opportunity to look into. Questions about dad? Sorry, I'm gonna make that. That's the last time I make that joke. Yeah.
You said you're capped at applying to 30, right?
Yeah.
So is there a certain strategy, maybe like one that you should think that you like the most, or one that you think is reasonable?
So there are a lot of opportunities through DOT, but it's not like the RUs, so what did it say on the last slide? Was it like 300 labs or opportunities? Was there a number on here? And am I just making that up entirely?
I think it was the last one.
Was it the last slide?
First one.
Over 300 internship opportunities. So it's not vast, but when I'm working with students, like, okay, so for an engineering student, it is like, I'm just applying to 3 in my lab, like in my area of interest. And I'm just, because you can essentially write the same cover letter 3 times what you're subbing out is maybe who the PI is, some specific content about the lab, but really it's the same letter 3 times. But again, for some students who do have pretty eclectic interests, it's okay to like, well, let me apply to this neuro lab, and I'm also going to apply to this psychology lab, and then I'm going to apply, it's totally up to you. But my recommendation might be to go for ease and really triple down on exactly what you're wanting to do if you can find 3 very similar labs.
So the cover letter is why you recommend 3.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you have to apply to 3. I think you can apply to less, but it's like, why not apply to 3, But Gilman is a scholarship I am really passionate about. So it always kind of finds its way into all presentations, but it's also because it's one of the most malleable scholarships that we work with. Long story short, if you are receiving a federal Pell Grant at the time of application or during your experience abroad, you're eligible to apply. Now, Gilman can be used for any international experience, and it does need to qualify for academic credit. So students can use it for traditional study programs, they can use it for internships, they can use it for foreign language study, or as recently as last year, Gilman added a new caveat. It is their supplemental STEM award. So typically, a Gilman scholarship is up to $5,000 to apply towards a program if you're choosing abroad, but it is up to $6,000 if you are doing research abroad. In any field, like STEM field, great, but if you're doing research in well, I guess it is exclusive to STEM, it's a supplemental STEM award. But you can, my point is, this is for STEM, but you can also apply to a standard Gilman scholarship and do research in any other field. They are so flexible in terms of what you're interested in doing. One website that I would recommend checking out, obviously, if you can study through Florida State, either through international programs or global exchanges, you might find some really relevant STEM coursework in your field, but Arcadia Abroad is a national organization that is specifically trying to kind of bridge that gap between STEM students and study abroad. So they have a lot of research opportunities and a lot of engineering opportunities, a lot of physics opportunities, in a lot of Western European countries, but also in Southeast Asia, in New Zealand, Australia. They have opportunities in South Africa and Italy. So take a look at their website. But we had our first student study through Arcadia Abroad and Gilman last year, and we had already a few more applicants for this year. But so there is a fall deadline, but that has passed. This upcoming deadline in March, that is for any program that begins in summer or fall 2025 or spring 2026. So you can apply a year in advance of when you would like to go, and say if you're not planning to study abroad until spring 26, you can apply this March, and if you don't get it, you can reapply in the fall. So you kind of have like a 2-for-1 opportunity to get funding. So yes, this can be stacked with other funding, but I don't believe it can be stacked with an IDEA grant. I think it depends. But we'll talk about IDEA grants in a little bit. And of course, I should have mentioned this earlier. If there's ever any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, or y'all know, just raise your hand. Yeah.
What is Arcadia Abroad?
It's a national organization for American college students who are looking for international study and specifically related to STEM. It's easy to forget there are few universities that have as robust of a study abroad program as Florida State, and it's not just IP. It's the Center for Global Engagement. It's the Global Scholars Program through the Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement, and many other opportunities. Some colleges just simply don't have that presence. So Arcadia is for those students, or for students here who maybe can't find a program that specifically aligns with their interests. Through Florida State, Arcadia is a really great supplement. And the prices are pretty equivalent to what you would just pay through a CGE or an IP experience here. Good question, though. Quickly, to touch on, so the Boren Awards, that is for foreign language study abroad. They have a very large list of languages that you can choose to study. You don't need a background in that language to study it. The reason I bring this up in this presentation is because So Boren, traditionally, to be competitive in that field, you need to have at least a 6 months to a full year abroad of studying that language. That's what you pitch to Boren. For STEM students, they understand your schedules are not that flexible in many cases. So they make accommodations for if you want to go abroad just during the summer to study that foreign language, they are willing to work with you and still fund you on that experience. Now, Boren's prerogative is careers with the federal government. And as you can see, they have these tier 1 agencies. That's going to be your Department of State, Department of Defense, the intelligence agencies, and so forth. And then they have tier 2, tier 3. So Boren wants to know 2 primary things: is why do you need to study this foreign language? How is it integral to the research that you are doing, or to the studies that, your career? And second, they want to know, what does that career look like with the federal government? And so for Boren, if you do receive funding, there's a 1-year commitment. Sometime after you graduate, you have about a 5-year window to complete this, to work for the federal government. Ideally on way towards a career in the federal government. And so the point is, there's a ton of government funding out there for foreign language study. And so if you want to find the intersection between that language, your academic interests, and your research, this could be a really great way to do it. And also have non-competitive status on the back end after you graduate when you're applying to those careers, those entry positions in the federal government, which what that means is if it's down to me and another candidate, and all things being equal, I'm a Boren scholar, they're not, I'm going to get the job. So they know those entry-level positions are really competitive, and so they try to make that a little bit easier. Amgen, again, I know I'm like, how are we doing on time? We're good. Oh, great, okay. Well, I'll take my time then. So Amgen is just another example of that intersection between research and international study. There are domestic opportunities through Amgen to get involved in research, but they're not sending you to Germany. They prioritize East Asia. I believe Singapore, Japan, and Taiwan are the destinations that they would send you to. You can see on this slide, these are the domestic partners that they have, as well as their international partners. So again, long story short, if you're interested in research, but you're also interested in traveling, Amgen could be a really great opportunity. It's one to take a little bit of time to look through the labs at these different institutions and what you would have access to. But Amgen, I believe, is the deadline on here, February. So again, those early spring deadlines. So this is something that we can start doing some research into now, maybe start putting some ideas together next month. And then once we get back in January, we'd still have about 3 to 4 weeks to get it all together. But you need to at least be a sophomore in order to apply. And you need at least a 3.2 GPA. For many of these other opportunities, I should have mentioned, many of them don't have a listed GPA requirement. It's something to look into, but for most opportunities, they're just looking at your qualifications and they're looking at the goals that you have relative to the opportunity that they offer. Okay. Idea grants and Tyler grants. So what we've been talking about up until this point, I know this is a ton of information. I don't expect you to remember all of it. Come and talk to Bonnie and myself. We will sit down and break it down for you again. But there is what Bonnie and I work with are the nationally competitive opportunities. Yeah, you get full funding, but there's no guarantee that you do receive it. But the best way to ensure that you're getting something, or that you're getting either the funding that you need or the access to the lab, is to pair these nationally competitive awards with the opportunities available to all students at Florida State. These are by no means every example, but these are 2 really excellent examples of what I mean by that. So through the Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement, I am not going to say that again, I will say CRE from here on out, there's idea grants, and that is pure and simple. It is funding for summer research, any field of study. It's not exclusive to STEM, and that can be I've had students that have applied and received idea grants because that is paying for my rent and my groceries this summer. So I can do this unfunded research project that I'm really excited about, but they're not paying for my cost of living. And then I've had students that have used idea grants to travel to these labs abroad. I had a student a couple of years ago that used this to go and do research at the University of Toronto in Canada. And so anything in between. As long as it's relevant to the project that you are wanting to do. Sometimes students will pair this with their honors in the major thesis and the work that they're doing there. Sometimes students will use this for a DIS opportunity, a directed individual study with their faculty. But you can apply to this as a solo applicant. Up to $4,000 you can receive, or for a group project up to $6,000. These are due, I believe it's spring, right? February, if I'm not mistaken. You're nodding. I'll trust that you know. So they're due in the early spring semester. Oh, it's on the like right. Reading comprehension is at an all-time low, people. I am really sorry. They are due February 2025. The one thing you do need to remember is that you need a faculty member to sign off on your project. They will mentor you. So use the fall semester if you need to find that mentor. Now, what is basically an idea grant with a different name? These Tyler Center grants, if you are doing research abroad, you would apply to this scholarship. It's only last year was the first year it's existed, so it's still fairly novel. But again, you have a lot of time to look into this to really find the proper lab, the proper mentor. So the point here is maybe start by looking through these REUs, get an idea for what's out there, start looking at what is available at Florida State, and start kind of putting the pieces together for what a summer could look like. Because maybe at the end of the day, I don't need that national funding to do what I want to do. I can use Florida State funding, and I can save some of those fellowships maybe for next year. Questions about idea grants, Tyler grants? Anything?
You said idea grants are stackable with some things, but not with others.
It depends. I've had students in the past that have received idea grants and other scholarships. And to try to be equitable, it might reduce the amount of funding you get from the idea grant in order for them to accommodate other students from Florida State that have applied. So apply to both, but sometimes the idea grant gives you enough funding for what you need. And like I said, then the other scholarships you can kind of keep in your back pocket for a later year. But if you can stack funding, like great, even if it reduces your, idea grant from like, 4,000 to like 2,000, it's still $2,000, but yeah. Quickly, because this is technically not a summer STEM scholarship, but it is a STEM scholarship that I care a lot about. And so if you are a sophomore or a junior, if you're in your second or third year, or if you're in your fourth year in a 5-year program, shout out College of Engineering, you would be eligible for the Goldwater Scholarship. Essentially what it is a scholarship. It's about $7,500 that if you apply and receive it as a sophomore, you would get for 2 years. If you apply and receive it as a junior, you get that for 1 year. And their whole goal is for you to be able to use that scholarship funding, put it towards books, tuition fees to hopefully ensure that you can devote more time to your research and be in the lab. But Goldwater has a pretty narrow focus, which is nice because it allows you to kind of tailor all of your essays to this focus. But they are looking for STEM researchers that are wanting to pursue a PhD on way towards a career in research. So if you like research and you want to stay in that realm, this might be the scholarship for you. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this is one of those fellowships where you have to work with our office to earn university endorsement before your application can be considered for the national competition. So what I mean by that is every institution from your Florida States to your Harvards can endorse 4 candidates from their applicant pool, a 5th candidate if there is a transfer student who is qualified, and a 6th candidate if there is a qualified student veteran who is applying. So most universities endorse 4, but if you're a transfer student, please apply. But your application, you will work with Bonnie and I on these, but then we recuse ourselves from the selection process because we have a Goldwater faculty committee from mathematics, physics, engineering, biology, and chemistry, who will review all of the applications and make those endorsements. That campus deadline is November 14th. And so it's coming up quick, but you still have a lot of time, but we do need to get the ball rolling if you're interested in that. Now, if you're one of the endorsed candidates, you don't have to, you have all of winter break in most of January until I believe it's the last Friday in January to make edits to your application and then formally submit. And so again, if you have questions, I'm happy to talk with you. This is one that you do need 3 letters of recommendation, ideally from faculty. You also, while the crux of the application is your research essay, it's a 3-page research essay, either on a project you've completed or a project you're in the midst of. And you have a few supplemental essays about yourself, your goals, so there is a lot of writing, but it's still definitely manageable if we get started soon. Tips for success. So I've been kind of talking about this throughout the presentation. I think a lot of this boils down to start early. Create that Excel sheet for yourself. List all of the REUs that you're interested in applying for. Maybe list a couple of these other scholarships. Even if you're not eligible for it this year, but you're eligible next year, add that to the list with the deadline and start talking to me and Bonnie as soon as possible. It's not uncommon for me to have a meeting with a student in the fall or spring, and it's just like, yeah, these ideas that you have are great. I'll see you in a few months, just to kind of check in with us. Read through all of these applications very thoroughly, but like I was saying, they all have very similar essays in terms of what you're needing to write. What are you involved in on campus? What is your area of research? What are the goals that you have? What's going to help you get there beyond, obviously, the opportunity that they offer? And again, just start building these relationships with your faculty, with people who can speak to your research abilities. I know a lot of you may be building really good relationships with the grad students in your lab, and that's great. But slowly start going to the office hours, slowly start meeting with the PI. But in many cases, these graduate students would be happy to write that letter of recommendation for you and then maybe have it co-signed or signed by the PI in the lab, again, if you're doing really good work. But anyways, tips for success. I've already kind of touched on this, so I don't need to be redundant. All of these fellowships basically snowball into one another, and so it's not uncommon for Bonnie and I just work with a freshman student on a few fellowships and then work with them every year on way towards graduation. These do kind of build and build and build upon one another. So then maybe by the time that you're a senior, maybe you're talking to us about a Fulbright fellowship or a Rhodes scholarship or a Marshall scholarship, these opportunities that could help fund a postgraduate master's degree or research opportunity, whether abroad or domestic, or apply to the NSF GRFP, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, which will basically pay for your PhD. It's a great scholarship, but it is 5 very dense pages of writing. And so these other scholarships are really going to help prepare you for that application. That's our contact information. If you want to follow us on social media, I would recommend following us either on Instagram or follow us on LinkedIn. The benefit of following us there is like we post about these types of workshops and info sessions, but then we also are pretty consistent in bringing back our alumni. For example, we just had an alumni panel talk last Friday with some of our Goldwater scholars from the last 4 years, because they span different classes. But then we also do Fulbright alumni panels, we do Gilman alumni panels, and so, I can talk about the importance and the value of these scholarships until I'm blue in the face, but sometimes hearing it from someone that was in your shoes just last year or a couple of years ago and where they are now can be really impactful. So follow us there or reach out to us individually if you would like to set up a meeting, just send us your availability. You can also reach out to the onf@fsu.edu account that goes to me, Bonnie, Sam, and Craig, and we'll respond to you there. But yeah, that's all I have. We still have time for questions. So Thank you all for joining. I know if you do need to run, please, do not let me hold you hostage, but I have time for a few questions.
Who's getting these emails? Like, why did I get an email about this? Is this just to everyone on campus or?
So unfortunately, Florida State gets really upset with me if I email 10,000 students. So I have to limit by some criteria. For this presentation, I was trying to prioritize STEM students as best I could, who met a GPA floor, given that, well, Goldwater and Hollings and some of these others require at least like a 3.2, you know, and so it's impossible to catch all students. We try to do our best, but also talk to your friends. You know, if this didn't sound as interesting to you, but you're like, oh, well, my buddy actually really wants to do this, then tell him to come and talk to us. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions, concerns?
With the first one that
Yeah.
you mentioned, I think it was like NS.
The REUs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it more like here, like in the US, where you can find those opportunities?
Usually, yeah. I mean, I've had students that have done REUs at Florida State, you know, because it was really relevant to the research that they were doing. Sometimes students are from here and it's like, well, I need to stay with family, but I want to keep doing my research. You know, but it's anywhere from Tallahassee to, you know, Seattle to, you know, Bangor, you know, whatever corner of the US that you're trying to get to, there's a lot of opportunities. And a few internationally, yeah.
Singapore, UK, Germany, Italy, Bermuda, Greenland, Switzerland, Belgium.
Greenland,
France,
hell yeah.
Mexico, Austria, I mean, it really just.
I mean, my advice usually is flee America, get out of here if you can. But you know, there are some good opportunities here still, but you know, if you can pair study abroad and research, like, I mean, kudos to you. That sounds like a really fantastic experience. But I don't know, students prioritize different things when they're looking at REUs. You know, some it's like, if it's not in my field of study, I don't want to do it. And like, obviously I get that. But other students are, you know, it's like, well, as long as I'm developing transferable skills, you know, I really just want to be in the Pacific Northwest for the summer. You know, I want to be somewhere that is not Florida weather over the summer. I don't know how many of you spent a summer in Tallahassee. You're from Tallahassee. It sucks, you know, but you deal with it, you know. But if you could be anywhere else, and I love, I'm from North Florida. I do have an affinity for it, you know, but travel when you can. Yeah.
Is it feasible to like study abroad and research at the same time? I feel like taking engineering thermodynamics and doing research would suck.
Dude, it's hard. It's really hard, but it's not impossible. Like I mentioned, Arcadia Abroad is a really great resource. The Center for Global Engagement has really wonderful partnerships with universities abroad. So you might be able to, maybe not research, but you might be able to take relevant coursework for what you're wanting to do. Start there. But you know, if you find an opportunity, bring it to us. By no means are we experts on every single fellowship that is out there. But if you bring something to us, we can help you work on it. The other thing that I would say with that is sometimes it really just comes from the relationships that you build. It is not uncommon for me to have students who have worked in a lab for a few semesters, for a couple of years, and then talk to their faculty. Like I had a student this past summer who went and did field research in Nicaragua, you know, because they built good relationships with their faculty, you know, and so sometimes that can lead to really cool TIS opportunities. I know for engineering it's hard, but talk to your advisors. See if there's any wiggle room for you. It's also, I've had engineering students in the past that were also looking for internship experience. The Global Scholars Program that I might have briefly mentioned helps you find those research opportunities. With many, like they have an emphasis for, you know, like nonprofit work or finding different, so it doesn't necessarily have to be related to engineering, you know, but if you care about certain parts of the world, certain communities, maybe you're like, well, let me take 8 weeks, not off, but just to do something different, because if that's going to help you in the long term, you know, it might be worth it. But yeah, that's fine.
My question was kind of similar. Do you think any of these opportunities you could like pair with like summer classes as well? Or would is it kind of like it's like a more like a full-time job or like focusing only on research?
It's not impossible, you know. I mean, my personal advice, so take it or leave it, is if you're going abroad, focus on that experience. Like you only get that so often, so I wouldn't try to be like, well, let me take my virtual college algebra class while I'm also trying to, do this really, I don't know, cool project, but it is more feasible if you're looking at like maybe a summer A versus like a summer, well, what is it? What's the breakdown? There's one in the beginning, the one at the end, it's like ABC, which one's the entire summer?
It's now the entire.
Oh, C's now the whole summer? Okay, so if you're looking at a summer A and then a summer B, then I've had more students do that where, okay, during the first half from like, beginning of May until, like mid to late June, I'm gonna be abroad doing this project. And then once I get back in July, then it's like, let me crank out the summer B semester,
I have seen more students that have done REUs where it's usually a little bit easier because they're in country for that.
Yeah,
But it really depends on the REU. Some of them will start earlier and then you still have that space to do a summer B class, but that's not always the
Yeah.
case.
yeah, I had an engineering student years ago who was kind of told the same thing, was like, you don't have time for this. But she was like, I want to do it, and so I know like it's when it comes to scholarship funding, when every student situation is different. And so for her, it was going to set her back a semester, but she really valued the experience and the work that she was wanting to do. So she was kind of like, screw it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to enjoy myself, it's going to be valuable for me. And if I graduate a semester late, then I graduate a semester late, I'm still graduating, and so again, every student situation is different, but other questions? Well, thank you all for joining. Feel free to grab snacks on your way out. And again, if you joined us virtually, thank you. Please feel free to reach out to us soon. Be happy to talk with you. But best piece of advice is just plan ahead. And so even if there's nothing that you're wanting to apply to this semester, that's fine. Please feel free to reach out to Bonnie or myself. Even if you're a little nervous about reaching out to faculty for the first time to ask about these research opportunities, it's also not uncommon for Bonnie and I to read email drafts. We are happy to talk. I know that sounds silly, but
We do it for each other all day.
I know, yeah, literally. I will obsess over tone in emails like coming from me. And so I will sit and spend like 10 minutes before I just send a simple email. So trust me when I say I know that it's really stressful, and I'm like, I need this person to know that I'm friendly and likable. How do I convey that in 50 characters? It's stupid, but anyways, jokes aside, please. Thank you for joining. You're welcome to go grab some snacks, but we'll be here for a few more minutes if you have questions.
Have
So
a great day.
thanks, you too.